Hi everyone, and a massive welcome to another live episode here on InfoSec Live, where we give you, our audience, the chance to learn from and interact with our industry's leadership. And today we have a very special vendor experience for you to enjoy with my good friend Steve Armstrong from Apexa IQ. But before we get onto the show, my name's Simon. I'm the founder of the InfoSec Live community and also your host for this event today. And by sharing stories and best practice over the last few months, it's led to 10,000 hours of our content being watched on YouTube by you, our amazing subscribers. So a huge thank you for your engagement. Thanks to your support, it's also led to the launch of our in-person community-driven events in the UK and the United States with a focus on knowledge sharing, networking, and definitely no sales pitches. Check out our events page for more info. Link should be in the description. With our next event here in the UK next week on Thursday on the 25th in Manchester, sponsored by Steve's firm Apexa IQ. Then on June the 21st in London to coincide with Info Security Europe with Next DLP before heading back over the pond to Stafford, Virginia to the Cyberbytes Foundation's Quantico Cyber Hub on July the 13th. Then in August, with events being planned in both Tampa, or not both Tampa, in Tampa, Las Vegas and Austin, Texas, with one maybe being sneaked in New York City too. We are still accepting sponsorship inquiries for our US tour. Drop me a message if you'd like more info. Meanwhile, back in the community, Precious, who I see in the chat, our community director here at InfoSec Live, has been organizing group study sessions, CV workshops, networking sessions, job alerts, and so much more. Make sure you check out the community if you haven't already. And if you'd like to take a step further and offer some assistance to the community by way of sponsorship or giving up some time, please do reach out to Precious or myself. Let's work together to make a difference to those breaking into the industry. But if you don't have time and you still want to support the wider InfoSec Live community, our brand new scholarship fund, or indeed buy me a cheeky decaf coffee, we do have a few ways you can show your appreciation. First up, the ability to purchase super stickers in the YouTube chat if you want your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. So if you're watching this live, make sure you subscribe, drop those questions in as we want to make this interactive. Let's bring Steve on. Just got to find the stinger and we're ready to go. It's a bit of a mouthful, all that, Steve, to be honest.
That was a very impressive intro, I must say. I've never seen lights look so nice.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to come on and have a chat with us today. I see that we've got stacks of people in the audience as always, and like I just said, make sure you jump in with any questions. Let's make this as awkward and difficult as possible for Steve. Not really. Let's make this as interactive and engaging as possible. Can we start off by you telling everyone a bit about yourself and where you've come from?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam, not a problem. So I was born, I was raised, the usual sort of thing. But ultimately, I kind of fell into sales. It wasn't, an intention to end up in cybersecurity sales. I was a professional rugby player out of school or university. Unfortunately, I had a let's call it a disagreement with a large kitchen work surface, fell off a wall, and hit me on the head. Fracturing my neck, fracturing my skull, giving me what would be termed a moderately traumatic brain injury. So I lost my career overnight. I went from, the world is your oyster, an up and coming rugby player, to not really knowing what to do with my life. And that was when I was 20, 40, almost 42 now. And I kind of just fell into sales because of my sort of competitive nature. From, starting out, I've worked for bootstrap startups, the kind of places where you were worried whether or not you're going to get paid at the end of the month, to large organizations running, global regions. But ultimately, I spent the majority of the 20 years I've been sort of selling in startup technology space, predominantly, excuse me, in the cybersecurity space. End user facing in the majority of those, even if I've had a leadership role in developing and building out a region. I'm a great believer in that you kind of lead from the front. You've kind of got to be in it every day. Otherwise, you end up with a disassociation with what's really going on within end users, consumers of your technology. And then you end up falling into sitting behind spreadsheets, managing people on metrics, managing people by numbers. And that's, I think, one of the fundamental challenges that we need to address within our industry.
100%. Thanks for sharing that as well. They say, opportunities come out of the strangest experiences. Did you go straight into sales from when you had your accident, or was there a transition between that?
Yeah, so there was a small portion before I got into sales where I fell into personal training, being a personal trainer. I did a degree in physiology, so I understood the human anatomy pretty well. Ironically, I wouldn't have met my wife if I'd not had my head injury. So, as she always says, every cloud has a silver lining, which I assume she means she's the silver lining. So she's actually in the room next to me, so I have to be cautious how loud I say that. But yeah, I had a small sort of period of selling myself essentially. As a personal trainer, you're very much selling yourself based upon your personality and your knowledge. So you don't have really a support system or a network around you or a team of people. So you have to be relatively good having a one-on-one direct connection with people. And again, that connection piece, that's what's disappeared within our industry today.
It is. It's that building rapport, isn't it? Or the ability to build rapport. I remember, if you want to hear a sales analogy from the 1980s, which is it'll be early 90s when I started. I remember this is Sun Life Financial of Canada when they gave us our training. We were knocking on doors and going into people's houses. For a lot of the people, that was new to them. And their idea for building rapport was, as soon as you walked in the room, have a look around, see what you could see. Can you see any trophies on the mantelpiece? Can you see any pictures? Anything that you can relate to? Oh, I play football, or oh, I see you love fishing. Or as cheesy and corny as that sounds, it is about finding that bit of common ground, isn't it, to start building that rapport?
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably should caveat some of my commentary today in that, yes, I work at Apexa IQ now, running their EMEA region, but some of my views might.
I was waiting for this.
Yeah.
Well, before you cover your ass, Steve, do you want to just tell our audience a bit about what Apexa IQ do?
Yeah, so Apexa IQ sits across four key spaces around security, productivity, finance, visibility of all of an organization's assets. So internal, external, cloud, hybrid cloud, discovery, correlation, normalization of all of the data. So an organization's got a single view, or quote unquote, to use a piece of marketing spiel.
You're going to say the words, aren't you?
Single pane of glass. But in reality, we are a true single pane of glass. We are the pane of glass of the pane of glasses, if that makes sense. So we correlate and pull together all of this information and give you a single source of truth of all of your assets globally around any organization, allowing you to respond more effectively to issues, allowing you to understand when things go end of life, allowing you to plan from a finance perspective, understand the security posture. We are very young as an organization, but I've never worked for a tech company or a security company or a vendor that has had such a mature product so early in its infancy, essentially, as an organization. And I think one of the interesting things here is we were built by an end user. So we were built based upon a problem that a very senior individual had within a very large US financial organization who threw millions of dollars at technology companies to try and solve this problem and never got resolved. So he left, built Apexa. And yeah, I'm having great fun building out the channel, working with end users. And yeah, it's an interesting ride. Startups are great, multiple hats. Today I'm on here. Tomorrow I'm doing some channel training. Then I've got some marketing stuff that I do. I do a lot of content writing for the organization, and then I also sell some stuff now and again.
It's nice to hear you do that now and again, Steve. So I know one question we're going to get is, are they recruiting at the moment?
We will be very shortly. So we're going to be looking. We have, as a company, one of the things that we do is we partner with universities and organizations to offer internships and to get people into the industry early, both from a technical stance, so working inside a vendor, building out the product, helping secure the technology, right through to business development, where you might have the misfortune of having to work alongside me. But hopefully I can instill some a different perspective around how to actually talk to people, not use too much automation, which I'm not a fan of. But yes, so as we scale, we will be taking over the industry, as they say, and yeah, we'll be hiring a lot.
Love it. Right, let me get their website and drop it in the chat just in case anyone wants to flag that for future. And I think a path to genius, it says, quite like that.
Yeah,
the thing I think we should start on, we're going to talk about the current sales practices in the market and what's gone right and what hasn't gone right. And when it comes to the hasn't gone right, you see a lot of comments from leaders moaning about the approaches on LinkedIn and different mediums. But for anyone else who's been in sales, it's all very well for people to say it's all about relationships, it's all about relationships. Yeah, that's great. I completely agree. It is all about relationships. But when you're a new startup with no relationships, how are you meant to reach out to people to start developing those, Steve?
Yeah,
you mentioned the word automation
yeah.
a little while ago. Let's dig into that. Give me your opinion on that.
Yeah, so if I go back, 20 years when I first got into tech, completely green, didn't understand, I struggled to put a DVD in a DVD player back then. Now I'm relatively technically savvy because I'm a great believer in you've got to learn. You've got to try and ingest the information. You've got to be able to have a credible conversation with end users and your peers and other vendors. If I go back then and I look at the last 20 years, it's been this weird sort of creeping decay in the industry of, and again, I'll try to keep my language polite. There's a hatred between org sales and end users. I see it quite a lot. There's this end users tend to not like the approaches that are taken by vendors. And vendors get very annoyed with end users when they won't say how to be approached. It's, I'm a great believer in if there is a problem, whatever that problem is, highlight the problem, but come with a solution.
Yeah.
The solution might not be perfect, but let's have a discussion. So I think there's a connection between, the sales side of, selling technology or selling anything really, and how the consumer of that technology or that solution wants to be contacted. But to simply, bemoan the sales strategies of organizations and then leave it at that doesn't really resolve the problem. The problem is, if you go, okay, I don't like the way that I'm approached, well, then how do you want to be approached? Like, bring the solution to the table. Say, well, I prefer it in this way. And I get they can't have that conversation with every single person who tries to reach out to you. And that's another compounding problem, is there's so many vendors. There's so much technology out there. And it's not, we would essentially at Apexa say that we're a cybersecurity focused solution. I mean, a SaaS-based platform focused on cyber. I'm not just competing with other cybersecurity vendors, of which are about 2,500, if not more.
Yeah.
I'm competing with every technology vendor out there that is trying to get that wallet share from that organization. There's a finite amount of money. And as you mentioned, following up on the concept of automation, the industry has moved to the lowest common denominator. Like, how do I throw enough stuff and hope
shit at the wall? Yeah.
Okay. I'll be a bit more, myself. How do you throw enough shit and hope enough sticks? And unfortunately, the simplest methodology that organizations use, and I think end users get an understanding of how vendors are targeted, KPI'd, compensated, driven, managed. There's a lot of poor management in our industry when it comes to sales enablement, training, knowledge transfer, but all automation platforms. There's some great technology out there. No disrespect to those technology vendors. They've filled a niche. They filled a requirement that people had. The problem is it drives laziness. It's built, these automation platforms that you can build a cadence of emails and LinkedIn connection messages or phone calls. So you'll lose that personal connection. And it's that erosion of that personal connection that I think end users are losing, because at the end of the day, as soon as one person started doing that automation thing and, mass messaging, I mean, gone are the days of, like mass emails and, being spamming people. But there are technology platforms out there that, do all of this work for you in the background and, sending and it's very impersonal. Everyone's getting the same sort of messages. Yes, you can do A and B testing, and that's all the sorts of things that marketing teams and sales teams talk about internally. It's like, what's the ROI and what's the open rate, the click-through rate, all those sorts of things. And my view is, well, what's a conversation rate? How many conversations are we actually having? You have two aspects to lead generation. Essentially, you have lead generation itself, and you have demand generation, which tends to be more content driven. Getting everyone to understand who you are as a vendor, what you do, your value proposition, your benefits, your business value, all that sort of thing. And then you have the lead generation bit, which is unfortunately where the industry has kind of fallen down a bit, where it's a volume game. It's throw enough and some people will be interested. And that problem is exacerbated because all of the vendors are doing the same thing. So there's some very successful sales automation platforms out there that are worth billions because we've become lazy.
Yeah.
We have become an industry of lots of business development people internally sat behind laptops who are fundamentally KPI'd on volume of activity, not quality of activity and quality of engagement. And that, I think, is what's driven end users to have this perception that we're all greedy and just money hungry. And so you get paid well in sales at the end of the day if you're good at your job.
It's a hard job, though, right?
Super stressful. I'm happy talking about the fact that one of my sort of first big roles in an organization. I did it 3 years when I left. I was bedridden with stress. Because I was running around so much, the pressure was so high, but it becomes tolerable because your body just gets used to it because you're in this consistent running cycle. And as soon as you stop, that's it. Everything catches up with you. So
it used to be for me when I went on holiday. Yeah. So you'd be looking forward to the holiday all year. You'd actually let your body relax, and by day 2, you've got a chest infection.
My wife, even to this point today, tries to take my mobile phone off me when I go on holiday. When I got married 15 years ago, and she actually took my BlackBerry back then off me and locked it in the safe because I don't switch off on holiday. because of the pressure that is applied to salespeople, and pressure's good, but it's the right type of pressure that needs to be applied, and you need to apply the right level of support. So when I'm leading teams, I really want to understand what motivates an individual, not what makes an individual fearful. Unfortunately, there's a lot of what I would call old school sales leaders in our industry.
Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross.
Yeah, always be closing, ABC. Who are management through fear, management through KPI metrics, management through, well, you didn't do enough calls today, you didn't do enough of this, you didn't do enough of that. Right? Well, okay, if you're going to have, you can have that conversation with them completely, but how are you going to help them achieve that? How are you going to help them move forward? And a lot of them, because they're so detached from what actually happens on the sales front, because they've been, in management for so long, they don't actually have a solution for it. So it's just this constant pressure, which then gets applied onto end users. So, during a sales cycle, when you're going to get this done, and there's all these different types of sales methodologies and processes, and qualification criteria. So things like MEDDIC. So if there are any end users listening, go and have a look at MEDDIC or MEDPIC as a sales qualification framework. You'll start to be able to hear the questions. And it's an industry standard. It's one of the best things that came to the industry. It's about qualifying opportunities. But it gives you an idea as an end user, why are you getting asked all these questions? Because I, as a salesperson, a little bit less now that I'm more in a leadership role, but I, as a salesperson, had to answer all of those questions to my leadership about the opportunity that I was working with an end user. So if I can answer those questions, then I get, pressure applied. So that's why salespeople are often, unfortunately, very much driven or come across as driven about closing the deal rather than helping the end user, because it's like, what's the sign-off criteria? What's the, who's that? Who's the, a lot of questions that build no rapport.
Well, this is about culture, though, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the fundamental challenges that I've seen is it's now become kind of a bit of sort of I don't know, Mexican standoff, if that's the right term, between end users and salespeople. There's always this sort of toing and froing, and to the end user community that's out there, if you don't know how to buy this technology, whatever technology it is, if you are unsure of your own internal processes, because a lot of end users I've worked with don't understand their own internal buying processes, how they have to buy tech, especially as, my career started around the same time that a CISO kind of became the thing. And obviously it's become more and more of a thing. And a lot of CISOs that I tend to speak with have got technical backgrounds. So they've started their careers in the technical side, and then they've developed into essentially a leadership position in a business role. And they don't necessarily understand how the business works. And so you've got to be able to, as a salesperson, I've got to be able to identify that and take them through that process. But at the end of the day, if you're not interested in a technology or a solution or a widget, I just want end users to be empowered enough to say, I'm not going to be able to take this forward, because there's nothing worse as a salesperson. You've got technical resource pulled into an engagement. You've got yourself, you've got your time, you've invested time. You're talking up the deal internally to your leadership team. You've maybe got proof of value in place or proof of concept. And in reality, the end user had absolutely no intention of buying the technology in the first place. But just, I see a lot of people who want to keep themselves busy, so they'll go through these processes. And then you get to the end.
I think again, Steve, you're touching on something there about perhaps the behaviours of some of the leadership in the industry as well, where they're a bit fearful of telling you no, because again, it's not something that they've had to do before.
I mean, as a Brit, and culturally across, certainly in EMEA, which is a lot different to the US, certain people don't like to say no. They don't want to come across as negative. They want to be appeared as innovative. So that's why a lot of startups get annoyed, because they are seen as innovative technologies, and people, end users want to be seen as innovative and, bleeding edge, and, bringing, vendors in that are going to change the landscape significantly, but with no intention of actually buying. And I've got no issue with that. But at the end of the day, the entire both sides of this industry needs to embrace transparency more. Yes, we need to build relationships in a better fashion because our side of the industry has gone to the lowest common denominator. Get as much information out there to as many people as possible, completely impersonal. And then the end user side also needs to say, I'm really interested in technology. This is my process. This is the methodology we go through. There is competition. This is nothing worse when you're in an engagement and you're speaking and they just won't tell you who you're competing with.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't personally care if I was in an engagement. We have some competition in our space, and that end user told their competition they were competing against us. I don't see the issue with that. But it feels a little bit deceptive when you can't get all of the information that you're looking to get from an end user. But that's also on us because the methodologies we use now become so impersonal. You can't build a relationship with anyone.
You've got to be able to ask the right questions, and to ask the right questions, you need to have that relationship in place in the first place.
Yeah.
Just jumping back a bit then. So, talk about innovative technology. Talking about the challenges that startups have in this space, especially when it comes to enterprise type customers who want that vendor who's known and been in the market a long time. What can startups like yourselves do differently, or do you rely upon existing relationships that you've already got with these people, or is it a bit of both?
So there's certainly an element of that. I've got people that I have quote unquote sold to over my career who have either been in large organizations for a significant length of time and are quite senior, or ultimately have been promoted and moved around. And because I've forged a good relationship with them, I can have just a very open conversation with them about what we're doing, and if that's of value. And there's certainly a number of, well, a lot of people my kind of age, I'm not saying younger people haven't done this, but people who've been in the industry a while, you get to know people well in the end user space, and hopefully you've not burnt bridges. And you can go and have those conversations with people who are perhaps able to be, like a technology partner. Yes, you're going to sell them the technology, but you're probably going to get a bit of a deal because you're so young and you're immature as an organization. There's a bit of a risk associated to working with you, but you need that relationship to have that conversation in the first place. Going into a large multinational global organization and saying, "Hey, we're a startup with 5 people. I'd really like to sell you my tech." It doesn't matter how great your tech is. The reality is you're going to be seen as a huge risk, a financial risk, potentially a business risk, a technology risk. Are you going to be around in 3 months' time? So it can be very difficult. The methodologies, or the ways that I tend to work is through partnerships, so partners. So there's a lot of channel partners out there who do offer the trusted advisor role. Let's try and get all of the cyber lingo out there. The trusted advisor partnership that they've had.
I've got acronyms and buzzwords on the list next. Actually.
Yeah, there's a lot in our industry, unfortunately. So there's very much a working with partners, enabling them to be successful, hoping and to a degree pushing them to position your solution to their key client base that they do a lot of work with today. That's one of the easiest ways that a vendor, a smaller vendor or a newer vendor can certainly scale. And even global vendors, some of the largest vendors in the world are channel-centric organizations. They work through their channels. But when you're in the early stages, it's very much kind of the friends and family concept of, right, who do I know really well who will take the time to actually speak to me because they know I'm not, and I'll say, a bullshit artist. I'm going to say, these are the things we're good at. These are the things that we perhaps need to ultimately improve in our technology, but we want to partner with you to help. But partner with you, but you need to give us some cash because we can't do everything for free. And there are some vendors that do that freemium model as well.
They do, yeah.
In terms of they'll have a certain set of features and functionality that's removed from a platform, sort of the enterprise grade version, and they'll give the platform away from a freemium perspective, which is great for product development, product feedback, and relatively good for salespeople. You know, a lot of people say, well, how does freemium help a salesperson? Well, guess what? If 10,000 companies are using the free version of your technology, you've got 10,000 people you can call who know you. Yeah. Hey, you're already using widget 2. Do you want widget 3, which is going to cost you some money?
Which is loads better with all the bells and whistles.
All bells and whistles.
The proof of concept part seems to be a big player when firms come to market as well. I've only learnt this. I've only been in the industry 2.5 years myself, but the amount of startups I've spoken to who, through relationships they've already got, they'll get a proof of concept in place in a big organization that then gives them that social proof that they need to then start reaching out to other people.
Yeah, I mean, proof of concepts are highly valuable. But again, it goes back to that relationship, and you know, so a lot of people, a lot of end users don't understand the cost that a vendor goes through in order to take that client from, hey, great to meet you day one, to closed sale. It's an expensive process to sell to an organization. Yes, hopefully at the end of the day that expense is covered by the fact that the organization's paid you. So proof of values are great, but they are highly expensive things to do, because you've probably got, you know, product teams, you've got solutions engineers, you've got architects involved, and it's expensive on both sides, because ultimately, you know, I'm working with a global consulting company at the moment. They're also global MSP. They're one of the world's largest organizations who, you know, are going through a proof of value with us, and, you know, fingers crossed, we're all there. It's all done. Just got to get through paperwork. But they've had probably 35, 40 people involved in this.
Yeah.
So I think that's great, because they've shown investment, because they've got all these different people involved. You know, we're working with a global CISO, and then from there we've got, you know, governance, risk, and you know, compliance. We've got product leaders for different security products they have. They've all invested their time. So I understand it's quid pro quo. It's expensive on both sides. But there's nothing worse for a startup working with an end user who's, you know, I'm thinking of one here, but I won't name them, you know, earning over billions in profit, right? Not just turnover, profit. And you spend 6 months on a proof of value. And let me caveat this: that's not Apexa, it was another vendor. And you spent all that time and effort and money, and they just turn around and go, nah, actually, we've changed our priorities. You know, 6-7 months after the engagement started.
At this point, you're allowed to swear excessively, I think.
Yeah. You know, you walk away, and that leaves a bad taste in the vendor's mouth. And I don't forget. I'm like an elephant. There are a few, and I hate to say this with NG, there are a few notorious end users who are known as tire kickers.
Yeah.
Like, they, you know, I'll see them pop up on a forecast, and the sales rep will be like, "Oh, I'm so excited! I've got engagement," and I'm like, "Yeah, they're never buying it." Like, they're just known across the vendor industry as a tire kicker. They will meet you for lunch because they like a free lunch. Yeah. They will go out with you in an evening because they like being wined and dined. They will do a proof of value because they can show that they're trying to be innovative internally. And the sort of salespeople in the industry as long as I have, there probably should be a WhatsApp group that sort of like, these are the guys you just don't want to waste your time with, because they will literally just drain you of resources.
It sounds like a whole new series of shows to me, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, but conversely, I'm a member of some other groups that are all owned and driven by end users, and I'm one of the I guess rarefied salespeople that's allowed in there, because I don't really sell. My view is, if I can do something that's valuable, awesome. If what we do isn't valuable to you, awesome. I'm happy to still have a chat and be friends. Right.
Well, this brings me to the point of, for any people who are new to sales in the industry and starting out, they'll probably listen to this conversation thinking, yeah, it's great. You know, you're telling me I've got to build long-term relationships with these people, but like you said at the start, it's about those KPIs, it's about those metrics. How many people you spoke to? Where are they in the pipeline? But I think the point I want you to get across here is, irrespective of what your boss is telling you at this point or your manager is telling you, these long-term relationships you're building up by perhaps being honest and saying, do you know what, this isn't the right fit for your organization.
Yep.
That's going to win you so much more kudos. I mean, one, if they come across someone who that your product's a fit for, they're going to probably recommend you. And two, when they move to their next role or their company matures and they might need your service, you're going to be the one that they come to first. But unfortunately, your manager won't have that as a metric. So how can they manage that, Steve?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Simon. So we would call it qualifying out, right? So my mantra is always be qualifying out, right until you've got the purchase order. Always find a reason why they're not going to buy. And if you can delineate that and find that out right up front, that's great for you as an individual, because you can have that honest conversation to say, you know, Simon, thanks for your time. I don't think we're a great fit for you today. You know, I'd love to keep in contact. And then you go from there. You know, you don't have to. And unfortunately, keeping contact often means that they get put back into some sort of automated cadence of emails to keep them warm.
But then is this where you step in as an adult to think, I'm going to do my own bit of keeping in contact here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. There's no KPI for qualifying out.
No.
You know, it's all about pipeline development, all about number of activities. I mean, one of the organizations I work for, again, not naming names,
but not Apexa.
No, prior organization. They had BDRs or business development representatives or sales development representatives who were undertaking over 100,000 activities a month. So that's emails, LinkedIn messages, automated emails, phone calls, but they were celebrated for the volume of activity when their conversion ratio from that level of activity was like 6 or 7 zeros behind the decimal point. It was like 0.00001% conversion. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. But unfortunately, it requires a complete step change across the entire industry to improve training. Because, you know, if I'm a sales leader responsible for training everyone through the sales process, so, you know, generally, and a lot of people might not understand this, there are different parts to a sales organization. There's, you know, sales development, business development, so BDR, SDR functionality, which are probably the people that are maligned the most, because they're the ones that are using these platforms. They're the ones
that are the door kickers.
Yeah, they're very much driven around KPIs, you know, activity-based outcomes. How often, you know, how many calls, and then, you know, smile and dial. I still do it today. I do smile and dial once a week.
Do you stand up when you're calling, Steve?
Yeah, I normally have my headset on and I'm walking around. And if it's not raining in the north of England, I normally do it outside.
So very infrequently then.
Very infrequently. And they, you know, at the end of the day, so you've got the sales development, business development piece where you've got generally quite junior salespeople. You know, that's generally where a lot of people start in their sales career, is SDR, BDR. Then you have kind of, you know, account managers, you know, corporate sales execs, account execs. You know, then there's just naming conventions a bit messy, and there's lots of different people. Because I've got friends who are account execs who are on £500,000-600,000 a year, because the company they're in. The account exec in that company is a lot different to they're actually an executive, whereas, you know, we call account execs, and so you've got different levels of sales.
See, I'd have called account executive someone who sat on a telephone all day making calls.
Yeah,
but that just shows my archaic knowledge of the industry.
Yeah, so you've got, you know, as a sales lead, you've got all these different types of people that you have to train, enable, support, develop, mentor. Sometimes we kick up the ass if you need to do that. But across those different ones, I've got certain skill sets around understanding what motivates people. You know, whether it's someone who's, you know, ultimately, you know, I hate to say that people work for me. People that I work with in my teams, but also with end users, because you've got to build up personal relationships. So, you know, what's motivating them personally to buy this technology, or, you know, what's motivating them professionally to buy this technology. So I've got certain skill sets. And that's the same as a lot of people, but the BDR, SDR function, they're very young salespeople generally. It's not, I'm not pigeonholing them, they're all young, but generally quite new salespeople. And as a sales leader, it's like, hey, here's a platform. I don't have to do any training. I just basically teach you how to use a platform. Sit here, write these out, press that. When something, someone clicks on it, because like if you get an email
That's
from
not sales, Steve.
I
That's
know
not
that's
sales.
that's what the industry's turned into. So, as an end user, if you get an email from a vendor that you can kind of look at and think, yeah, it's got my name on it, dear Simon, but it's just written slightly cold in terms of it's not personalized. It's just the second you open that vendor knows you've opened it.
Yeah.
So, guess what? You're getting another one, and then guess what? You're getting a phone call. And it's just this, and that's the problem, is if you multiply out the number of vendors by the number of SDRs, by the number of daily activities, you can understand why technology end users have a slight disliking of vendors. Because, there's 2,000, let's say there's 2,000 just cybersecurity vendors. And there's, say in a region, 1,000 CISOs in that region. Then there's across that, there's their inbox just gets hammered, and their phone is constantly going, or that's why gatekeepers are a thing. No, he's in a meeting when sat right next to him. No, he's in a meeting, still in a meeting.
It used to be boxes of biscuits for the receptionists that used to win people over for me, but you can't do that anymore, right?
Yeah, I did one very short stint after being a personal trainer before I got into tech sales. I did door-to-door sales, very much like. Now that door-to-door kind of business orientated sales, so commercial sales, but literally, here's your bag, there's your region, off you go. There's nothing that is a baptism of fire. Walk into a business and sell to them. But I think there's that's an art to end up being good at that.
It is an art, and it's a difficult. I mean, I've sold lots of things door to door. The first thing I sold was mobile phones when they were this big.
Yeah.
And my biggest arrogance of youth faux pas was walking up to, it was a window manufacturing company in the east of England. Walked up to the door. There was a chap, an old boy outside, washing down some Jaguar car. And I made the flippant comment of, oh, you don't want to do mine next to you, mate. Well, that was the owner of the business, wasn't it?
Yeah. I've been interviewing people, and I've got to, this is 3 or 4 vendors ago, I've got to my office where people have been coming to get interviewed, and I've had someone call me a set of interesting names as I've been trying to get my parking spot because they wanted to get in it. And it turned out I was interviewing them. So I was just sat there, right. But I won't judge because, I don't know what's been going on in that individual's day. They might have had a terrible day.
Yeah.
They could also just be a bit of an ass. I get that. But you never really know. We all lose our temper and things. But getting back to end users. So what end users I think really need to understand is the way that sales organizations are driven. Very KPI driven. The number of activities you've got to do. Forecasting should be a science, but it's more of an art form. Because
what do you mean by that?
So most vendors are quarterly driven. So especially if they have a VC behind them or a private equity firm, certainly if they're a public company, they have to do they're quarterly driven in terms of revenue. So what you'll generally see is your forecast goes like this. It's always first 2 months of the quarter, kind of chilled out, a bit relaxed, no pressure. Last month, oh my God, absolute panic. Discounts flying around, end users put under massive pressure to, magic up a purchase order, even though they've got, we haven't even got into contracting. We haven't looked at red lines. We haven't looked at terms and conditions. We haven't signed MSAs. oh yeah, can we get all this done in the next 3 days? And I've worked with super large end users like that. It's a 9-month cycle to get that done. We've got 500 different things that we're doing at the same time. It's going to be 9 months. That's great for me to know that because that's in my forecast now. But it's that's why end users get lots of pressure every 3 months. Is that there's a desire to hit a number, and there's nothing worse to a vendor, especially startup vendors who are driving perhaps a Series A, Series B, Series C round when things fall out of that forecast. Now, part of that is sales naivety. Part of that's happy ears, the concept of overqualifying out. Even when you at red lines, I still try and qualify out. Like, what's going to screw this up?
Yeah.
But they have happy ears. So then there's the other aspect of end users making promises that they don't keep. That I see a lot. Oh yeah, we can get this done. And then the savvy ones will know that vendors are quarterly driven, and they'll just go, no, can't quite get the budget. Can you give me, maybe if we do a bit of a discount, I can get it over the line, even though they've already done it. They're literally squeezing you for every penny, which is fine. But what they often fail to understand is that can put a startup out of business. Because if they miss their revenue numbers, that might stop them raising the funding round that they need to keep the doors open. Because building a technology company is a bloody expensive thing to do. Unfortunately, salespeople like me are not cheap. Technical people nowadays can pretty much demand whatever they want. And you've got marketing budgets to think about. You've got payroll. Is obviously a big thing, but you've got all these other expenditures that are going out. Technology stacks that you're having to support in order to develop your technology, the tools you're using to develop the technology. You've got all of this cost that's sunk into the business, and then you've got end users who are potentially going to sink a company because they made promises, or they gave they let's say took the salesperson down a specific path, thinking everything was great and golden, and that that person is the decision maker. Very often it's not. They're not the one who's signing the purchase order or signing the check, as we say. It's someone else that they kind of try to keep you away from.
Isn't this about qualification though?
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I think, it's absolutely about qualification. It's absolutely about building relationships. But for example, this large opportunity I'm working on at the moment, and we're getting signed off, is great. I've not spoken to the actual buyer. I've spoken to 40 plus people, including the global CISO. But that's not the person who's actually signing it. I know.
And the likelihood of you ever speaking to them?
Zero. It's a board member of a multi-billion-dollar global organization, and one of the I'm a realist. I've worked in companies where my CEO or my VP of sales would have said to me, "Well, you should get time with them, speak to them." I'm like, how busy do you think this person is, and how insignificant do you think we are to them? This is a board member of a global Fortune. Don't want to give too much away. Let's call it Fortune 100 company.
It's definitely not that then.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, okay, you want me to get an hour of that board member's time to talk about an order that is a rounding error on their quarterly financials? Okay, great, no problem. So I'm a realist. Is that you've got to have good coverage across an account. You've got to have because one of the things I do, and I preach and teach salespeople I work with, is always ask different people the same question, so you can work out which ones.
You mean different people within the organization that you're dealing with?
The same engagement, the same question, and we won't define that question. That's a bit of my secret sauce. We won't say what that question is, but it's always useful to be able to understand who's being really truthful with you and an end user, because by human nature, not everyone is completely honest and open and transparent. And like, you might not get to the actual buyer, but is the person you're working with enough of a champion? Do they have enough internal sway to be able to actually push this through and get it done? Does your champion actually have a relationship with the buyer? Because sometimes they're disconnected. Does your champion and the actual buyer hate each other? Because that's often, they'll spend the champion will spend 6 months driving an agenda and positioning your technology internally and going through the process. You're forecasting it. You're like, we're nailed on, and then you find out that your champion and the buyer absolutely hate each other, have fallen out for the last 5 years, don't talk to each other, and basically whatever your champion brings to your buyer, the buyer just wants to
say no.
Just going to sink it, just out of spite. So there's all of these things, but again, that leads to salespeople and going, I've been screwed over again. It's like, right, okay, well, you've got to learn by your mistakes. But I think just having a level of transparency between the buyer and seller, having an actual relationship, which is very difficult to build. I completely understand that. I'm fortunate that, when I started, there was emails, clearly. But, it was sort of smoke signals. That was the easiest way to communicate. It was
not cut from string.
No. You had to, because there weren't so many vendors, because there was not a huge amount of competition per se. I mean, there was a lot, but you were able to actually forge some pretty decent relationships with people. Relationships that I've had for the last at least 15 years with some of the people that I've worked with and sold to. And I really feel for people coming into the industry now, because it's very difficult to build those relationships. That's why I think communities like this are great, because there's a lot of, you've got a lot of people within the InfoSec.live community who are sort of coming into the industry. It's their first step into the industry, and maybe it's, hey, if I make friends with someone here, help them a little bit, they might be a CISO or a buyer in
100%,
10 years, and they'll go, hey, I'd love to, let's keep the relationship going. And I'd say that for junior, newer salespeople, it's really important to put the ego aside, because salespeople are known to sometimes have an ego. Learn, be very humble, and understand you don't know everything, but also for end users,
or at least pretend you don't think you do.
Yeah, well, I'm a great believer in that. If you got a bit of bravado from a salesperson is okay. But I'm a great believer in it. If I don't know something, I am going to be so honest and say, I don't know. I will come back to you with that answer, but I will actually respond to the answer.
And people appreciate that a lot more.
There's you can smell a lie. I get sold to every day. In the position I'm in now, I keep getting technology. We've got this automation platform. We've got this. We've got that. One thing I will say actually is there's been a bit of a step change in the people that have been trying to sell a solution to me in terms of like lead generation or user engagement. A lot of them that I'm seeing now are actually moving away from automation and going, we've got a team of 60 people who will actually speak to prospects. We've got, they're moving away, and we do a lot of the manual research rather than just so that every message that goes is, like you said, oh, see you interested in football, because they've researched this individual and they can make that human connection. So I'm seeing a lot of services now sort of going back to the way that we used to speak to people. And
that's refreshing to hear, Steve. That is.
Yeah. So I just think, ultimately there needs to be just a little bit of a change from an end user's perspective, to understand that salespeople are put under huge pressure by the companies. And yes, it can be extremely rewarding if you're humble, if you're lucky, if you're good, you can do very well in this career. I've been fortunate to do pretty well. Not as well as my wife would like me to do, because she always wants more stuff. But hey, that's.
I take it she's not in the room anymore.
No, she's left. So I can say, not getting your handbag.
He's not that brave, folks.
So I just think that if we can try to educate as sort of sales leaders, educate the new salespeople in the fact that don't rely upon tech too much. Become members of communities. Don't try and sell in those communities. Try and just make connections where you can build a relationship. Some of my best friends are people I've never sold to, but I've met in this industry. So they're not on my side. They're not on the dark side in the vendor land. They're on the end user side. But I've made friends with them, and I've never tried to sell to them for various reasons. But
just haven't had the opportunity yet.
So no, also ultimately, I think it's we need to educate the sales, the new sort of blood of sales. Is that it's not stack them high and throw enough at the wall and automate everything, because what happens is you get junior salespeople using automation tools, and they have their value, those tools. I'm not giving the negative thing. They have their value. But then that junior salesperson moves into the next stage of their career, and there's now no automation tools. You've kind of got to speak to people a little bit more, and you've got to be, confident enough, shirt, tie, suit, whatever, get out in front of people, sit down and have a conversation. And I've had people that have come to see me in various roles who've been trying to sell to me, and you just sit there and go, "Oh my God, you're like a robot." Like you've literally, and it's kind of like, you just need to realize that the buyer's human, but also the buyers need to understand that salesperson is also human. And, I know we're getting towards the top of the hour. There's nothing that, this is where I might get a bit contentious. There's nothing that riles me more than seeing on social media platforms senior executives in large firms bemoaning salespeople, saying how much they hate salespeople, saying that because ultimately they have salespeople in their own company.
Unless you're a not-for-profit, which has probably also got salespeople to generate revenue, most people wouldn't have a job without the sales team. Let's be honest.
Exactly. So I had an argument years ago with a very senior exec from, well, I'll call it out, Google. One of my sales reps was, trying to position technology with them. And he sent what I would consider one of the most abusive emails I've ever read to my rep, basically saying that salespeople were scum of the earth. This is from Google. This is from a Google exec.
The irony.
I got straight on the phone because he was a bit of an idiot, and he left in his rant. He signed off with his email signature, so his phone number was on there.
Brilliant.
So I was like, right, fair game now. And I'll be honest, I threatened to put the email out in public. Because I was like, look, the only reason you're employed in the probably ridiculously large salary you've got today is because Google sales teams have done exceptionally well to sell the technology that they have.
Yeah.
So, if you're saying that all salespeople are quote unquote scum of the earth, what are you saying about the sales teams that work within your organization? Do you have that same opinion? And very quickly. But again, it's like, oh, I've had a really stressful day, yada yada. And I'm like, okay, I'll let it slide.
Doesn't mean you have to be an arse, does it?
Doesn't mean you have to be an arse. So I just think there just needs to be a rebalancing. I don't know what I said earlier, if there's a problem, come with a solution. I honestly don't know what the solution is to this problem.
I think you've already hit on it, haven't you? Which is companies changing the way they recruit salespeople and the way they connect with companies, because automation's always going to be a part of it now.
Yeah.
But it's reintroducing that human aspect back to that process, however we do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. That is the solution. How you implement that, I think, is going to be the challenge, because if you think about all of the vendors out there, all the technology companies, all the people selling windows and doors and widgets and whatever it is, anyone selling to a business, they're all competing for airtime and the same wallet. So it would take an industry step change for people to go, okay, maybe we've done a little bit too much of this automation, too much of this sort of spamming. How do we as a broader industry connect better? Conversely, what would be great is if the end user community could come together and go, these are the ways we want to engage with our vendor community. These are the
I don't think they've got that answer though, have they?
Yeah,
Because all I see on LinkedIn is people telling you what not to do.
yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. Again, it's there's a problem on both sides.
And the real irony behind it is if it didn't work, companies wouldn't still be doing it, would they?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. It does work. Um,
Yeah.
but could you be more efficient? Could you build more established, better relationships? Where the end user doesn't view you as a salesperson and you're just someone who's trying to sell to them. But unfortunately, you're absolutely right. Yeah, volume does work still.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of fish in a barrel, it's easy to shoot them. If there's only
Yeah.
one swimming around, you've kind of got to spend time trying to catch it. And I don't know what the exact solution is, but I think one thing that the end user community could do would be to ultimately just be a bit more transparent in how to work with them, how to engage with them. We know the things that annoy them because they're happy to tell everyone what annoys them.
Yeah. Tell us what's good as well.
Tell us what's good. Tell us how we're doing
Yeah.
good, because we'll do more of that good stuff.
And I think you'd agree, Steve. The only way we're going to improve the current cybersecurity situation around the world is if vendors and end users do start to work together more.
Yeah, you get better outcomes if you work together and you work closely. The outcome will be better for both organizations. But if there's always this adversarial approach, it's never going to lead to good outcomes for either side of the organizations. Either the sales team are going to miss numbers, they're going to give you poor service, and end users are going to get poor service or poor outcomes. So we just need to be much more close as a community. I know that's difficult because there's still that perception. It's like when you go to try and buy a new car, you walk in the dealership and you can see the salespeople's eyes light up and stare at you, and they're like, "Right, whose turn is it?" So people don't like going and buying cars because they know that. I mean, I've seen adverts where it's like that we don't have salespeople.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of do.
Of course you do. Yeah.
People. They're called customer advocates.
That's it.
Still a salesperson. So yeah, there just needs to be some sort of change between the way that end users want to be engaged in terms of them being transparent about that. There needs to be an understanding from an end user perspective of how vendors are internally motivated, driven, and KPI'd, because that internal motivation drivers and KPIs metrics drives a certain type of behavior.
Absolutely.
And that behavior is represented by that salesperson in an opportunity. So, you think that salesperson's being a bit of an ass. Well, guess what? He's probably getting, or she's probably getting, a lot of pressure from some muppet like me who's like, well, why is it not closing?
Well, do you know what, Steve? I think out of all the sales leaders I've spoken to, I'd quite like you to be my boss. So I'm going to take that comment back from you. I think. Look, we're out of time. We've also only gone halfway through the list of things that we were going to talk about today. So would you mind coming on again in the next couple of weeks?
Absolutely, not a problem.
Excellent. Because what I'd like to do as well is focus a little bit more on helping those who are coming into sales in the industry to help, I hope, shape the future of the cybersecurity salespeople to be behaving in the right way and with the right practices and the right approach. So, Steve, everyone, thank you for your engagement, everyone. I think you'll all agree, a very insightful session with Steve. I'm back in the studio in 55 minutes with Jacob Friedman to talk about what it means to be a tech scout. Bumped into this guy, RSA, a few weeks ago, introduced to me by my good friend, Steve Hindle. And apparently he's a bit of a force de majeure in the industry with regards to bringing new tech in. Steve, it's a contact I want to put in touch with you after the call as well. But Steve Armstrong, thank you so much. And for anyone who's in Manchester, if anyone's watching, we do have 3 tickets left for our CISO Experience event next Thursday. Drop me a message on LinkedIn if you'd like to attend. Steve, see you very soon, my friend.
See you soon.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Cheers all.
Bye-bye.